What if I told you one of the richest civilizations on Earth was not defeated by an army, but by a company, and in just 2 centuries, a land of gold was turned into a land of hunger? This is not fiction. This is history. Welcome to Unbound Core, where history is not just told, it is felt. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a country whose rivers carried prosperity, whose fields produced abundance, whose artisans created wonders that amazed the entire world. A civilization so wealthy that it powered nearly a quarter of the global economy. The world looked at this land with admiration and with greed. They called it the Golden Bird. That land was India. For centuries, powerful invaders tried to conquer this soil and failed. Armies marched. Empires rose. Kings dreamed of ruling it all. Yet this land endured. But history does not always change with the sound of swords. Sometimes, it changes quietly. On distant seas, ships began to move. They did not carry conquerors. They carried traders, men with polite smiles, contracts in their hands, and ambition in their eyes. They came for spices, for silk, for opportunity. But beneath the language of trade lived the hunger for control. June 23rd, 1757. The Battle of Plassey. On one side stood Nawab Siraj-ud-Daulah with an army vast and confident. On the other, a small force of the East India Company, led by Robert Clive, a man driven not by duty, but by desire. What happened that day was not truly a battle. It was betrayal. Mir Jafar, the Nawab's own commander, stood silent on the battlefield. One promise of power, one whisper of a throne, and an entire nation's future was sold. With that moment, the door to 200 years of suffering opened. After victory, Clive entered the treasury of Bengal. Before him lay gold beyond counting, jewels beyond imagination, wealth greater than the riches of London itself. And then it began, the Great Drain. Treasure filled ships, ships crossed oceans, and prosperity left India, never to return. A trading company had become a ruler. And rulers who seek profit do not protect. They extract. Taxes rose higher. Farmers grew poorer. Villagers fell silent. Even when crops failed, taxes remained. Even when hunger spread, grain was taken. Then came the year 1770, a famine so devastating that millions perished, not only because the rains failed, but because compassion failed. While families starved, profits were counted. While bodies fell, revenue was celebrated. History would remember this as one of the deadliest man-made tragedies the world had ever seen. Yet the destruction did not end with hunger. India once clothed the world. Its cotton was softer than air, its textiles finer than imagination. From royal courts in Europe to palaces in Asia, Indian fabric was prized above all else. But British factories could not compete with Indian skill. So they chose another path. They did not compete. They destroyed. Heavy taxes crushed Indian goods. Foreign goods entered freely. Looms were broken. Artisans were ruined. Great cities of craft turned quiet. A self-reliant civilization was transformed into a dependent market. But oppression always carries a cost. Pain becomes anger. Anger becomes resistance. And in 1857, that resistance erupted. Soldiers rebelled. Farmers rose. Communities stood together, Hindus and Muslims, side by side. For the first time, the empire trembled. The response was merciless. Executions without mercy. Villages burned to ash. Bodies left hanging as warnings in the wind. The rebellion was crushed. But something irreversible had begun. The desire for freedom could no longer be silenced. Decades later, another moment arrived. April 13th, 1919. Jallianwala Bagh, Amritsar. Thousands gathered peacefully, unarmed, hopeful. Then came a single command. Fire. No warning. No escape. No mercy. Bullets fell for 10 endless minutes. The ground turned red. Cries filled the air. A well meant for water filled instead with bodies. Terror was meant to silence a nation. But blood has memory. And memory creates revolution. Years passed. Struggles continued. Sacrifices multiplied. And finally, after 2 centuries of exploitation, famine, violence, and resistance, freedom arrived. August 15th, 1947. The rulers departed, but the wounds remained. A divided land. a struggling people, a future uncertain, yet something powerful survived. Hope, because wealth can be stolen, power can be imposed, borders can be drawn, but the spirit of a people cannot be destroyed. The golden bird was wounded, but it was never dead, and today it rises again. If this story moved you, become part of the journey. Subscribe to Unbound Core, where truth is remembered, history is awakened, and freedom is never forgotten. Stay aware, stay strong, stay unbound.